Well, I just kicked off a quick render, and this brings up a couple points and a couple of things we should edit before we get too far along. One thing, I think that bump map is still a little too strong. There's a smaller scale texture, so I'm going to knock that down real quick. And another thing to note is all this black that we're getting in the ice cubes, and that's a pretty easy fix. First thing, let's just kind of clean up that bump map. So again, if you just click in preview, that's going to load up that material. And we have this other noise layer, the little smaller scale one we have here. And I'm just going to knock it, oops. If you double click a layer in here, it's going to bring up preview, which I don't want to do, because we already have a preview render going here. But I'm just going to take this small noise layer, again, let's set the bump map, and just knock its opacity down to maybe 50%. And we want to get some of that in there, but we don't want it kind of overriding the glass, making it look too much. We'll take a look at this again after we do another render. But the other thing to note I saw in that render, if we just pop open our render window again real quick, is all this black that we're seeing inside those ice cubes. And that's basically the ray tracing for the refraction rays are kind of getting bouncing around in that glass, and they're never really exiting, so they're leaving a value of black. So to change that, if I'm going to click here, the word render again in our shader tree, brings up our render properties here in our properties tab. And we're going to go to the second setting on the right under settings. And here we see the refraction depth set to 8. So what that means is the camera rays are sending out basically little refraction rays. It's hitting the glass material. So that's kind of using up one of its rays. Then it's hitting up the liquid inside. Then it's hitting, just kind of imagine these little arrows shooting out from the camera, or from each pixel, actually, shooting from the pixel themselves. So he's shooting out. They're just kind of bouncing around inside this glass. Anytime it hits a refractive material, it's going to kind of look at the color of that refractive material and bounce back to its original position. But basically, we're never getting enough of those rays bouncing around. So at some point, they're going to render back a value of black. So we just need to bump up the refraction depth. So let's try 12 first. We went from 8 to 12. And already, boom, you can see a really big difference in there. All that sort of black noise we saw just got alleviated. And now your glass is looking a lot brighter and a lot more realistic. So again, over in preview, we can see how it went from 8 rays, all dark in the glass, really black inside of there, to 12. And 12 might be enough. I often will even do 16 perhaps. But it seems 12 is enough for these rays to kind of finally exit through the liquid, through the glass, return a value from the environment, and come back and hit those ice cubes. So I'm going to again leave it on a depth of 12 for now. And if we ever need more, you can refine it later on. So that's one way to get rid of those sort of black noise layers in our refractions. But if you go to the material itself, so let's go to the ice cubes themselves, take a look at the layer here. And under material rays, there's also this ray exit color. I think by default, that was a preset material, but by default, the exit colors mean black. So that's basically what we were seeing earlier, is they were never exiting fully through the glass, never making it through, so they were returning a value of black. You could always kind of make this a value of white and kind of fake it for the ice cubes, which isn't fully realistic. But if you want to kind of save your render time, instead of actually adding more refraction rays, you can just change this ray exit color. Again, under the material itself, third tab down, material rays. You can also make it green, some other weird colors if you're trying to get a more stylish, non-photorealistic render. But again, to keep it more realistic, come to your render settings and change your refraction depth up to 12. In the render, you also saw a bunch of noise and things like that, but we're going to refine that when we go to the render settings tab. So before we get too far, let's or not too far, we're getting pretty far already, but before we kind of wrap it up and start adding those light caustics, I just want to add a few more kind of lighting enhancements to the scene. One thing overall, I think the scene's still a little dark, so I'm going to come to the environment tab itself, open up the environment group, and come to our environment node, and the intensity is 2 right now, so that's all our HDRs that we have lighting the scene. I'm going to bump this from an intensity of 1, hit 2, And that just kind of overall brightens the scene. I like that. Might be too much for your taste. Maybe do 1.5. If you look at that final render, actually that final render I had was a little dark in the foreground, which is nice. So maybe, yeah, instead of going all the way to 2, let's just do 1.5. So we're just basically adding more light to our scene by turning the intensity of the environment itself up. Same thing when we were messing with the lights. You add, if you want more light from it, you come to your radiant intensity on the light material itself, and that's going to add more light emitting from that light. Same thing with the environment node. If we turn its intensity up, there's more light. It's going to be a brighter scene. I think the screen capture is actually coming out a little warm, but to be honest, my image here is looking a little too yellowish green, and I want some more warmth. I want to kind of really bring out that warm colors from that whiskey or brandy or whatever sort of liquid you're pulling in. But overall, I just think this image has a little bit too much greens and yellows. You'll notice it in your render. I think the screen capture software is making it a little bit warm regardless, so you might not see that here. But basically, I want to show you how to add kind of a process layer on top of this environment or on top of any material, and it's a way to add contrast or hue or remove some saturation from your image. It's basically like in Photoshop if you have an adjustment layer set to hue saturation or something like that. So while we're in this environment node here in the shader tree, I'm going to come to Add Layer, come into Processing, and choose a process layer. So under Processing, Process, for the processing layer, and a few of these you'll see are the bias and gain. If you turn the gain up, you're going to get more contrast overall. Hue, let's just say, or hue saturation. Hue is your color. That's the actual layer we're going to mess with. Saturation, if I turn that to -100, you're going to see our whole environment that we're seeing back here goes to black and white. Same thing if we turn the saturation up to 100, we're going to really boost and get some crazy colors out of here, but now we're going way too saturated. This is not only found just inside the environment node, node here, but you can add these process layers into any material group that you want. So instead of having to go to a third-party photo editing program and changing the intensity to an image, we could put this process layer above the table and make his effect set to the diffuse color, and you can kind of change the color of the image we have here. You can make it either, again, less saturated, all the way to black and white, or things like that. But really, I just want to kind of mess with the hue and remove some of the yellow out of here. So I'm going to slide the slider to the left a little bit and just sort of see what happens. I can already tell just by pulling it to the left, we're just kind of shifting the hue of that image. If I go pull it way far, 150%, now our whole image is totally red. Again, if I go up 100%, it's pushing away more green. So again, I want to remove the green from that. Like go all the way maybe like 500, probably push it somewhere blue. Again, we don't want to get too far of these crazy colors. We just want to remove a little bit of that green. So I can tell if I slid it up, we added more green. So if I slid it to the left, we're going to get warmer colors out of here. That's probably too far. -50 is a little bit too far for that image. It's going a little too red now. I'm just going to drop this to maybe not positive. Drop this to -30. And there we go. We got a little bit more warmth in that image overall for that environment. So again, we're just always refining our scene, working our way through it, and just kind of, it's a work in progress. I noticed one thing, the ice cubes were too dark, so we changed the refraction on those. I thought the environment was a little bit too green, so I added the process layer. I think most of our lighting is pretty good. Next chapter, we're going to work on the final sort of lighting tweaks, adding that highlight and adding our caustics. But this is just sort of a little tweaking chapter. So let's end it here, and we'll jump back into final lighting and setup on the next one.